One of the most common complaints I frequently get in person is that I am particularly mean or harsh with creationists. And in today's video, I'm going to explain in no uncertain terms as to why that's the case. For starters, I want to open up this video by saying that at face value, there's nothing innately wrong with being a creationist of any variety. I've had plenty of good conversations with young earth creationists and intelligent design advocates. So the real problem is not actually with creationists. It's with creationists who talk as if they are actually familiar with the material. Recently, I attended the UMJC conference this year, and on the ride back with my friend, we got into a conversation about another individual who is constantly talking about the Shroud of Turin. Now, I don't want to drag this conversation about this individual or the Shroud of Turin. I have a video on that. You can go watch it. And I'm thoroughly disinterested in publicly defaming the individual. However, I did utter something in that conversation that sort of echoes what I said in my defense of natural theism video. And I want to echo it here because I think I worded it better in that conversation. For context, this individual who I was writing back with has a master's degree in engineering. I also don't want to give their name away for privacy reasons. And what I said to them is never in a billion years would I even conceive of lecturing to them how engineering works. I've never studied engineering. I don't know anything about engineering. I don't know the first thing about it. So in my mind, it takes an immense amount of arrogance to start talking about topics that you don't know anything about. Now, it's perfectly fine to be semi-read up on a topic and speculate on it. It's even perfectly fine to ask questions, but to assert in such a fashion that you are familiar with the material, I think is unacceptable. It's pretty much as close as you can get to lying without lying. Enter the creationists, specifically intelligent design advocates and the young earth creationists. Both of these kinds of people who advocate for this stuff tend to speak in a manner that suggests that they are educated on the topics that they are talking about, even though they make massive mistakes. In order to highlight this, I'm going to go over everything that's ever been said to me in person that has ever gotten me even just a little frustrated, and then talk about what's wrong with it to highlight this problem. We'll start with the least egregious to what I would say is the most egregious. So, Josh, you're a science major. You really ought to be careful what they're teaching you. It's all atheistic, and, if you're not careful, you'll come out the other side just not believing. To be perfectly honest, it's not even that is false. That is semi-true to some extent, but it's filled with little half-truths that get me annoyed. Science is not atheistic. Science is apatheistic. It doesn't care whether or not you're an atheist, a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, a Buddhist. Science is a philosophical neutralizer. Anybody who is a participating scientist can perform the exact same experiment and come to the exact same conclusion. That's why we're dependent on testability. So the fear is not necessarily wrong, but the reasons why they fear it are kind of silly. Hey, Josh, out of curiosity, have you ever read Michael Behe's Darwin's Black Box? It's really, really good. Yeah, I've read it. I mean, I don't really think it's particularly all that good. Oh, so what? You just think stuff arose naturally? Well, I mean, yeah, that's kind of how it went down, according to the data. Yeah, but, where did all this complexity come from? You don't, come on. Complexity in on itself is proof that there's a God. So putting aside stuff like origin of life and evolution, because this is not what this particular video is about, complexity is not proof for a God. There can be plenty of complex things that have garbage in them, that have complete and total nonsense in them. Simplicity is the sort of tell-all of design. Take out your phone. There are no two buttons that do the exact same thing. Yet when we take a look at things like the DNA of an animal, it comes with 20 proverbial buttons, all of which do the exact same thing. The idea that complexity must equal God is just nonsense. This conversation then continues onto specifics about Michael Behe's book. I mean, so you've read the book, you looked at irreducible complexity and you just don't agree. Well, the problem with irreducible complexity is that the examples he provides are not irreducibly complex. Oh, come on, man. You actually think that, like, the bacterial motors evolved. And it's that statement right there that gets me kind of mad. It's one thing to be skeptical that it evolved. It's another to talk in a manner suggesting that you have read the material to know that we can't prove that, which makes it all the more frustrating that we have proven this. For anyone who's not in the know, Michael Behe's irreducible complexity has long since been debunked. In the experiment that he suggests to disprove irreducible complexity, which is to take flagellumless bacteria, put them in an environment advantageous for flagella and see if they evolve, we did that experiment 2 years before Behe wrote his book. Now, I don't expect anyone to be familiar with that info, but to suggest that it's not even out there, even implicitly, what are you doing? Oh, I just think that people are confusing branches for trees. That's all. Yeah. So you looked at Tiktaalik and what tree does that belong on? I couldn't know that. I just, that's just what I think. Now, again, this is a seemingly innocent, innocuous statement, but it is also implicit of knowledge that the individual otherwise doesn't have. In order for you to come up with the idea that we are confusing trees for branches, suggests that you are familiar with the fossil record to say that definitively, all while ignoring the entirety of the fossil record that definitively shows otherwise. Early Ediacaran fauna going from bacteria to complex life. Tiktaalik, the very famous one that was in my conversation with this individual, which essentially represents the change between a fish and a frog, an amphibian, essentially. Dimetrodon, the transition between a reptile and a mammal. Archaeopteryx, the transition between a dinosaur and a bird. on what tree would these belong to? And if you ask anybody who says this, they would say, they give you a variety of answers. There is no one answer to this problem. Like, again, innocent statement, but nested in it is a wee bit of arrogance. And the people who've said this stuff to me, it's not like I hate them. Some of them are my friends. But I'm harsh on creationists because they talk like this. You know, I spent years studying geology, studying physics, studying paleontology. By no means do I consider myself an expert on the topic. I'm not. But I know enough to know that when these people say these things, they're just wrong. And finally, the worst one that's ever happened to me. Hey, Josh, if alien life were real, what would it look like? Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, that would kind of rely on where the planet is. You know, the type of planet you get, as well as the type of star you get, is going to kind of limit what sort of animals can evolve on any particular planet. Oh, so you're a Darwinist? You believe in Darwinianism? You know, you can't believe in two religions at once. Now, the first thing I'm going to say about this comment is that this was said at the 2025 Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations convention. I don't know what my audience's familiarity with Messianic Judaism is, but it is essentially taking two religions and treating them as one. So saying that you can't practice two religions at the UMJC conference in on itself is just buck wild. We haven't even gotten to the what this individual actually said. To just say that and not be aware as to where you are, what are you doing? Finally, let's address what she said. Modern evolutionary theory isn't Darwinian. It doesn't adhere to Darwinism. Darwin's work can best be described as a very brilliant foundation, but ultimately we've moved past Darwin. In Darwin's time, they were still debating whether or not species could go extinct to begin with. Darwin didn't know anything about genetics. He didn't know anything about atomic physics. He didn't know anything that modern physics relies on. He didn't know anything about anything that modern evolutionary theory is built on. And this is something that has completely confused me, that creationists hitch their tent on the work of Charles Darwin, someone who has been dead for almost 200 years now, give or take, and whose work is not considered to be all that useful anymore. And I know exactly what is going on here. It's an attempt to make evolution out to be a religious premise so that way creationists can act as if creationism and Darwinism are in the same ballpark when they're not. If you recall my video on defending natural theism, 2 different games, 2 different rules. Narrowly shall the rules touch. And I think these interactions really encapsulate why I feel comfortable being harsh with creationists. It's not even like a religious need to make science work or to make it correct and absolute. It has more to do with me being unable to fathom why someone would talk about a topic that they clearly haven't actually read up in the manner in which they talk about it. And this is coming from someone who was not always a theistic evolutionist or a natural theist. I started my journey as a young Earth creationist. You know, and as I got more information and as I learned more and more, I went through every single phase of it. I went from young Earth creationist to old Earth creationist to gap creationist. the whole 9 yards, intelligent design, and then finally theistic evolution, because it's the only thing that actually works when you're familiar enough with the material. And that's not to say that, like, I think that, like, young earth creationists are, like, going to hell or something. Let's be very clear about this. This is not a salvific issue. But the way some of these individuals talk makes it seem as though it is a salvific issue, that you're not allowed to have an opposing opinion that they don't like. And so I feel compelled to push back on it. I'm doing this little rant right now because I'm still doing research for the Elucidating Noah's Ark video. And wouldn't you know it, the team that did the scans are young earth creationists. One of the things I didn't want to talk about in my video on Noah's Ark was young earth creationism or Bible literalism. Not that it's not a related topic, but that I really only wanted to focus on the boat. Just like how for the shroud video, I only focused on the shroud. I didn't personally attack someone like Jeremy Johnson, although I did let people know what my opinions on him were in a couple sentences. I didn't personally attack any of the physicists that came up with that radio burst idea, even though it's nonsense. And I certainly didn't talk about some of the more minor claims about the shroud because they just started spiraling off into other things. I wanted to talk about the main points about the shroud, and that's exactly what I did. But now I'm going to have to rewrite a huge portion of this script to filter out any and all young earth creationism. And I just find that personally frustrating. Hence why I don't have a problem being harsh with creationists. If you are going to act like you are actually familiar with the material, then it is absolutely fair game to start talking to you as if you have that level of knowledge. And if you at any point say, I don't know, well, then you shouldn't be talking like that. Is it weird that this is the second video I've had on this in my channel? Yeah, it's pretty weird. I'll agree with you there. Will Elucidating Noah's Ark be my next video? Probably not. It's going to take a couple more months before that one's done. Shalom Aleichem.